Everyone. My name is Greg Kessler, and I am a professor of computer-assisted language learning and instructional technology here at Ohio University in the United States. I am very excited to be meeting with you, be presenting virtually, and then later meeting for a question and answer session. I love this topic, and I'm going to be talking about the kinds of technologies that we have available to us today to enhance language learning and the experiences that we engage in when we're learning language, as well as talk about some of the technologies that are on the horizon, that are emerging. Some very exciting things that are developing that will greatly enhance and, in fact, completely transform the language education paradigm. So with that said, I'm going to get started with my PowerPoint. So the title of my talk is The Future of Language Education, Designing Meaningful Experiences. And I'd like to begin by introducing myself, but I also want to talk a little bit about the importance of digital literacy and the importance of being able to navigate the internet and recognize the great amount of resources that are available for us as language educators. So I told you my name is Greg Kessler. And a few years ago, a student came into my office and said, "I didn't know you were a famous artist also." And I said, "Well, that's news to me." And the student showed me this Wikipedia entry. And it's interesting. This gentleman has the same name as me. He's born just a few months after me. So it's a strange coincidence. But he is not me. And if you were to take everything on the internet at face value, you might immediately assume, as my student had, that this is the same person as me. But this is one of the challenges that we face with all of the content that is on the internet. I happen to think that the internet is filled with so much content that is extremely valuable for language learning, especially things like this Wikipedia entry or other socially negotiated pieces of human artifacts that are on the internet. You know, the word artifact typically is associated with an ancient society, something very, very old. I like to talk about digital realia or digital artifacts as being things that could have happened 10 years ago or 5 years ago or 5 minutes ago, but they are the remnants of human interaction on the internet. And not only do they provide us with great linguistic examples that we can use in classes, but they're also just really interesting examples of human behavior. And so I think that these things can be exploited in our language teaching. And I'm going to show you a number of examples of that. So here's another artifact that is more accurate. This is my faculty website. So you can see there's a brief introduction and some links and some publications that I do. This is another that is also more accurate. This is my CV in a word cloud form. So you can see words that you might expect to see, such as TESOL or learning, or CALL, which is of course the acronym for Computer Assisted Language Learning. Here's another digital artifact that is a good representation of me. This is a map that I made of all the places that I have given invited and keynote talks, such as this one. Unfortunately, this virtual one is not quite the same as being there in person. I wish I could be there with you, but I look forward to getting back to doing that someday. So here's a quick overview of some of the things that we're going to be talking about. When we're in changing times, we have changing needs. But the things that I'm talking about are also more effective in normal times as well. We need to really rethink instruction. We need to think the way we focus instruction, the effectiveness of our instruction, the authenticity, and you're going to hear me talk about authenticity a lot. Part of the reason why I like these digital artifacts is because they are authentic content. They're not the kind of content that you often find in a textbook that is contrived or artificial or not. It's not believable in many cases. We need to rethink the instructional potential of the time that we spend together in learning language or attempting to learn language. We need to think about creating compelling and engaging experiences, maintaining connections, harnessing cognitive surplus, and that is the mental energy that you have to do things beyond what you absolutely have to do to survive. This is doing things that are creative, doing things beyond what is simply expected of you. To promote participatory culture. That is the culture of the internet. That is the culture that makes people create things beyond themselves, that they do in groups often, that they do with others. It is how the internet itself is constructed. And we need to think about authenticity throughout all of this. So again, I told you, you're going to be hearing that word quite a bit. I'm going to be talking about a variety of engaging pedagogical approaches, and including various social media engagement, mashups, fan culture, gaming, gamification and game culture, digital stories, virtual tourism, augmented reality, mapping and data aggregators, and community engagement. We're also going to talk about some, including automated writing evaluation, automated speaking evaluation, self-access automated tools, data visualization, data-driven learning, individualized learning, and finally, the Internet of Things. So I want to begin by looking at a classroom. So this is a collaborative classroom. You see students working together in groups. This is one of many different ways that students may interact with each other in a physical space, right? I think a lot of times we talk about online learning or hybrid learning as being something monolithic. It all looks the same, but we know that all classroom instruction does not look the same. There's a lot of potential here for creativity. Students are in groups. They're writing on different parts of the board. The board goes all the way around the classroom, which provides for lots of different options for writing things down and sharing things with others. I think this classroom has a lot of great potential. You see the desks are all on wheels, the chairs are all on wheels, everything can be moved and reconfigured in a different way for different purposes. I really like this classroom, and I think some digital spaces mimic the functionality and flexibility of this classroom. Here's another very different space that also promotes interaction and collaboration. And you see the tables are a little more static. They're not going to be moving much, but they do allow for people to move around them, and people are working together in groups on different projects. Another example, all of these are very different. These are, of course, younger learners, and they are all working together as a group in a circle around a large table. I'm not sure what they're doing, but it looks like they're collaboratively constructing some sort of knowledge as they work together as a group. Another example, no table. We still have our circle. Some learners are sharing things. They're being identified. Perhaps they're just answering a question right now. They are able to all see each other. There aren't obstacles blocking them from seeing each other. I like this kind of a classroom as well, and I think digital spaces can often mimic something like this. However, when I go into classrooms around the world, including the United States, I see things that look more like this. This is slightly exaggerated because it's black and white, but you see you have all of the students are in rows. They're all facing one direction. The teacher is only at the back of the room because she's posing for this picture. She, of course, would normally be at the front of the room, and all of the students are looking at the teacher, paying attention to the teacher. It's all teacher-driven, teacher-focused. It's not focused on the learners. If you look here, I think you can tell who the teacher is, but the students are just as prominent as the teacher, right? So unfortunately, I see this a lot. And the digital equivalent of this is something like this. Students are using computers, sure, but they are in rows. They're not interacting with each other. They're only interacting with the computer. And this, I don't think, is a good development. This is not making the most of our ability to engage and collaborative communication-based experiences around the digital artifacts that we might identify and share with one another. Instead, it's a very isolating kind of experience, and it has the same kind of paradigm as the teacher-centered classroom that we see here. And what's most likely to occur in that space is something along the lines of this. It is the most mundane and boring and meaningless activity that we could have in a traditional textbook, but now it's available on the computer. I'm hoping that we're going to see less and less of this and more of the great creative potential that we have as language instructors and designers of instructional content. There is hope. This is a book that came out a few years ago, and I was one of the authors. A team of 6 of us from around the world authored the TESOL Technology Standards, which creates technology expectations and plans for classrooms around the world of all different kinds of students at all different levels and all different levels of access to technology. It has many different stories about examples of different classrooms, and it has a set of expectations for what learners and what teachers and administrators should be able to do and know about the use of technology in order to make the most meaningful experiences for the learners. So some of the themes that are emerging today, we have diverse social and language practices. We have a diversity of learning environments. We have improved learning design. We have artificial intelligence and automation, augmented reality, data and learning analytics, ongoing assessment, the potential for individualized learning, and the Internet of Things and future of assessment. In the diversity of learning environments, we have a number of different spaces. I'm going to be showing you some of these. Like I said, online spaces are not monolithic. There are many different forms, and I'm hoping that as people recognize that and realize how different many spaces can be, they will be able to identify and design those spaces that are most meaningful for the experiences that they want their learners to have. So we currently are thinking about active learning spaces, open learning spaces, game-based learning, localized gaming, diverse online environments, augmented reality, virtual reality, and social media. And I'm going to show you examples. This is an active learning space. So you see in this space, the person standing in the middle of the room is the instructor, the teacher, and the students are working together in groups around the room. Each group has its own small screen that they can share their displays with each other in that group. And then there are large screens placed around the classroom where a group can share with the entire class. This is a very large active learning space. There could be a couple of hundred students in here. And often when classes get this large, people think you can't engage in collaborative, constructivist learning activities. But this is happening, and I have done this in many classes myself. And you'll notice the instructor is not the center of attention. The instructor is there as a resource if the learners need him, but the learners are engaged in the task at hand, and that is the way that things should be. In gaming and gamification, there are a few things that we've learned about this, and this is from an article that I wrote a few years ago. Commercial educational games are uninspiring. They're boring. They often don't result in learning. They look good typically, but they just haven't been very effective. It's difficult to implement games for all students. Some learners really like playing games, and others don't like games at all. Some really like certain kinds of games, certain kinds of video games maybe. This could include board games. This could include other kinds of games, but we typically think about video games. Localized games benefit from authentic context and allow for extensive experiences. Customized or individualized games provide context, supporting unique environmental and linguistic needs. And these can be designed locally by learners as learning activities. They can create their own games. And there are, in fact, platforms, and I'll be sharing some with you, that allow you or your learners to create your own games. And involving students in that kind of creation offers them unique and very valuable opportunities. So I want to show you a couple of examples. This is a freshman composition course that takes place at my university that is taught completely inside of the game Minecraft. And in this game, students are writing about their experience within Minecraft that they are collectively experiencing, and they are doing this during a zombie apocalypse, which is a very popular kind of fandom. And so the learners are writing about this, and if you're not familiar with Minecraft, it is a collaboratively constructed environment that actually supports collaborative constructive learning. And in the world of Minecraft, society functions much like it does in the real world. It only happens at a much more accelerated pace. So societies build very quickly, and then societies collapse very quickly. So you get to see the kinds of things you might see over hundreds of years in a matter of days. And so the students are living through this, and they're excited, they're frustrated, they're angry, but they have all these strong emotions, and they write about that. And in fact, in this class, we have found that learners were writing nearly twice as much as they would write in the regular equivalent freshman composition class. We have social media. There's so much potential for using social media in education. And social and new media are ubiquitous in our lives today. This is the number one reason. It's just everywhere, right? The artifacts of social and new media are rich and compelling. It provides us with authentic context, tasks, and other things that are authentic kinds of language, authentic practices. There's more opportunity for practice and feedback. And there have been studies that have shown that students, college-age students in the United States, are actually spending more time writing and doing more writing in these spaces than they would be doing otherwise. And you will hear in this country, at least, a lot of people say that students don't write anymore. Well, they don't write in really conventional, traditional ways, but they do write in these social media-based spaces. And as far as I'm concerned, getting students to write in English, if that's what they're learning, is great. And if they're writing about something that they're interested in a space that they are interested in, then that's even better, because they're bound to do more of it and be more interested in it. But I want to provide you with a little bit more evidence of why you should consider this. This is a very recent snapshot of the digital footprint around the world from January of this year. The entire population of the planet is 7.83 billion, and 5.22 billion mobile phone users exist from that. So that's 66.6% of the population are using mobile phones. 59.5% of the entire population of the planet. So this is everyone alive. This is children, this is the elderly. 59.5% are using the internet. 53.6% are active social media users. I think people who are in the age group that are learners are probably the vast majority of these participants. This is an overview of global internet use. I find this information fascinating. Like I said, I think even just bringing in artifacts like this one into a classroom as a discussion prompt or a writing prompt is really interesting. Why are there 59.5% of the planet using the internet? Why is that? Why do people think? What do you say about that? What's your opinion, right? Why do people spend almost 7 hours a day using the internet? Maybe that's some part of your work. Maybe it's some entertainment. I'm fascinated by that. That's a lot of time. That's probably as much time as we spend sleeping every day, if we're lucky. And why are 92.6% of the users that access the internet using mobile devices? And more importantly for us, what does that mean about how we should approach education if 92.6% of all the internet users are using mobile devices, maybe we should be trying to meet them on mobile devices. There's some more details. Like I said, I find this really fascinating, and I wanted to share them with you because you might also, and you might find them to be very meaningful and help you think about teaching in a different way, but also think about what we're doing in humanity right now in a different way. So this is the growth, and every year this is growing. I have not seen, I've been following this for at least the last 10 years, and I have never seen a year where there's been a negative or a zero. It's always a plus. It's always increasing. So in the year 2020, we have 13.2% more active social media users than previously. So that, I think that promotes the idea that we should be using social media for education. Of course, I think you're familiar with these. I think you have other things in China as well. I know I've used QQ. I think there are plenty of new platforms all the time that are emerging. This is another artifact that I think is fascinating. Again, it could just be a prompt for discussion, but it's also just really interesting to see what happens in 1 minute on the internet. The 2021 version has not been released yet, so I couldn't share that with you. I wish I could. But in 2020, 1.3 million people logged into Facebook in 1 minute, right? So 1,400 downloads on TikTok in 1 minute, for example. And that's 2020. I am sure TikTok has increased dramatically since then because it is a platform that has gotten much, much more popular since that time. And this data can be presented in lots of different ways, just like that profile of me at the beginning of the presentation. And that's the reason that I shared that, because there are so many different ways to visualize this stuff and this information and to understand it better. And that's true with any information that we share today. So with so many different ways to represent things and to conceptualize and visualize them, we need to think carefully about how we go about doing that. So I want to share some of my favorite English teaching resources with you as well. This is a website called Youglish. It is probably my very favorite single website that is specifically for English teaching. It is YouTube and English combined. And with Youglish, what you can do is you use the entire YouTube collection of videos as a corpus. That means that you can search for a word or a phrase, and you get to see many different examples of that word or phrase in actual authentic videos. So here I have searched for the phrase "don't know," and I get to see 30,903 examples of this. So I get to listen to these. I can go from one to the next, or I can listen to a longer example, including the phrase "don't know." By the time that I listen to 3 or 4 of these, I probably have a good idea of how different people pronounce "don't know." I should be able to find one that I can mimic, that I can use as an example for myself. If not, I can listen to 10 more. And I can then search for something else. It's a fabulous site. I can't talk about it enough. This is a tutoring system that we have been using with Google. So this is a combination of Google Docs and the video streaming. And so we have a tutor and a student, and this was something we did prior to the pandemic. To accommodate students in their busy schedules. So the student and the tutor could meet online, and they have the student's student's paper, and the tutor is highlighting parts of it and asking the student questions about it. And then that is documented, it's marked up, there are chat comments in here, and they have a video recording. And this entire session is recorded, so when the student leaves, the student has this whole experience to refer back to as a reference. If you were to do this in person and you leave the office and you go home, you are relying on whatever you remember. And this archive is really valuable. I want to talk about a variety of different immersive and virtual reality spaces. And so I'm showing you this picture from 12 years ago that I created. That is me and a graduate student of mine. And we created this space where we wanted to make a space where we could be virtually immersed in any place that we could find on the internet. And this is using Google Street View. And so we are in, this is in Manhattan, New York City, United States. And we created this by simply connecting 3 projectors to a very powerful computer. So the computer could project to all of these. It's one extended picture that is across the entire space. So we could be in this room with 4, 5, 6, a dozen students, and we get to share this virtual space together. Of course, I said this was 12 or 13 years ago. So this was something that we had been working on for quite a while at that time. But now we have so many great advancements in this area that are really changing our ability to share a virtual space and have that context available to us as we engage in meaningful learning. So I want you to watch this video.
My name is Lance Teasley. I'm in middle school in Eagle Grove, Iowa. Eagle Grove is not a very tall place. It's actually very flat. This is the tallest building on Main Street. It is about 50 feet tall. When I grew up, I want to be an architect and design skyscrapers. Yesterday at school, we were on a class trip, but this was not a normal trip with buses. This was something very different. The very first expedition we went on was to the Burj Khalifa.
Go ahead and grab 2 hands and put them up to your face.
It's so tall!
Okay, we're going to go to the 153rd floor.
So if you have experienced virtual reality before, it's often a very isolating experience. You put on these goggles and you are by yourself, and it might be very interesting. It might make some people nauseous. It does that for some. But the way that this has been reconstructed in the Google Expeditions environment is that it is a shared space among a group of people. So now you could be in a classroom together, or you could be at home in a virtual class, and you could all be sharing this same virtual space. And of course, there are thousands of different virtual spaces that we can inhabit together regardless of where we are. And so this is a screenshot of Google Earth, which has connections to different spaces all over the planet that we can explore together. And so we might be doing some sort of content-based learning, and we can go to the locations that are relevant for that content. So it's very exciting and a great way for us to engage in a meaningful, authentic language exercises. As you can see, there are many different locations and many of these immersive 360-degree virtual reality experiences, including some in Chengdu. So I could choose a number of different locations where I can see more about Chengdu up close, right? And so I can zoom in and I can visit the Global Mall and Water Park. And this is a 360-degree space that I can navigate, and I can describe this. Maybe I'm doing a writing activity, maybe I'm speaking about it, maybe I'm asking questions. You know, when was this built? What is that being projected on that giant screen? But there are some other interesting places. I'm sure that you're familiar with these. This looks like a really fascinating place that I hope I get to visit someday, the Chengdu Panda Museum. Right? I'm sure that you are all, like I said, familiar with this. But I get to navigate this. I don't get to go inside here. A lot of these virtual experiences, in fact, most of them, let me actually navigate the space and move from one area to another. This one only allows me to see this one area right here. This is another example that is actually a depiction of ancient Rome completely constructed inside of Minecraft. And it is elaborate. It is huge. If you're not familiar with this platform, you might be surprised to know that the entire country of Denmark, this was almost 10 years ago, the entire country of Denmark was mapped inside of Minecraft. There are many other extensive areas inside here. A lot of China has also been mapped inside of Minecraft. You can explore things like the Great Barrier Reef with David Attenborough, and so you get to go under the water and actually visit this actual physical space, right? So it's not like the Minecraft example. There are so many different examples here. So we've got some where, in the Google Expedition example, we're actually looking at a video of a real place. We've got some that are artificial environments that mimic real places, and then we've got some that might be impossible for us to ever go to, like the Great Barrier Reef, and be under the water with these people with fantastic video equipment documenting that for us. Here's another one under the sea where you can swim with sharks. You can also travel to the Louvre Museum, and you get to this virtual reality tour that takes you all through the museum and teaches you about the art that is in the museum. You can do the same with the British Museum. And this British Museum virtual reality website takes you through time, so you can visit any place that they have artifacts from, and they have a lot of artifacts from all over the world from a long period of time. So that's pretty exciting. You can explore shipwreck, or again, there are different ways of thinking about this. So you can explore the human body and anatomy, and you can virtually dismantle this body together as a group again, or you can reconfigure it. You can look at different parts. You can look at just the circulatory system or the skeletal system, and you can look at just the muscles. And so you can dissect the human body in a safe and ethical way. Or I could be in a kelp forest. I could be on Mars. I could be in front of the building where I teach, hanging out with Bernie. I could be in Minecraft, traveling through the city of Los Angeles. I could be in a classroom with a group of children. I could be wandering through virtual Pompeii. There's no limit to the places that you can be. I'm going to take it back down a little bit and talk about some really basic things. There are other resources, digital resources that are available on the internet that are much more accessible, perhaps much easier to utilize. And some of them are collections like this. We have ELT Pics. So this is a curated, archived collection of images specifically designed for English language teaching. And so they are intentionally collected and freely available. They are legally free for everyone to use for all kinds of different instructional purposes. And you know the saying in English, a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? So I'm often happy if I can get 10 words out of a student, and that would be worth it. You have other resources like this one. This is one of many that allow students to create their own comic books. And they can make themselves the hero of the comic book. They can make the comic book happen inside of their school, inside of their neighborhood, maybe in their family. It's a great way to engage students in a writing activity that becomes more fun. And even if you think this may only be for children, it's interesting that a lot of adults find this engaging, and there are a handful of people now in the United States who have published dissertations, so PhD documents, as graphic novels, which is a lengthy comic book. And this leads us to the idea of using popular culture in language learning. So we have things like picture stories, which is the comic book. We have fan fiction, including stories and videos, digital storytelling, memes, mashups, and there are really endless creative options. So when I talk about fandom, if you don't know what that means, I'm talking about things like Star Wars. I'm sure that some of you are fans of Star Wars. There are fans of Star Wars all over the world. What happens in fandom with fan fiction or digital storytelling is that fans can write a different kind of a story. So maybe now there have been so many Star Wars stories that you could take them in different directions. But what if Star Wars happened in China, right? What if you write a prequel to the last Star Wars movie? What if you write a Star Wars movie that takes place in a totally different universe? You just take it in a new direction. And if learners have that opportunity, some learners are going to be really excited and engaged in doing that. Memes can be some of the most basic things. All you need is a simple picture and a little bit of text. It could be one picture and one word, and you put them together. Maybe you give pictures to students. Maybe students bring their own pictures. Maybe they have a list of vocabulary and they have to match the picture with the word. I mean, this can accommodate students at all kinds of different levels. I like this meme because it's comparing ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs to emoji. And so 4,000 years and we are back to same language, right? So if I assume most of you are not familiar with ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, but I would imagine that almost everybody is familiar with most of the emoji on here. That is a form of literacy today. Customized maps. I showed you this map earlier of places that I have traveled. You can create maps like this for yourself. Students can create these kind of maps. You can create scavenger hunts. You can create maps that map historical sites, maps that map important cultural events, all kinds of different things. And you can even do this in a very sophisticated way. With Google Maps, you can take a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet or some other sort of spreadsheet, and connect that with a map, and you can have the map automatically display any kind of data that you have. So it's really fascinating what you can do with maps. And here's an example of a mapping project that we used a few years ago, a telecollaborative exchange that took place inside of Google Maps and Google Street View. And we had students in the United States studying Japanese, and we had students in Japan studying English. And they would meet about every week, and the students would take pictures and videos of their day. So this picture is right outside of a student's apartment in Tokyo, and the student took pictures of walking to school and wrote a story to her partner, and you see on the map she's mapped exactly where she lives. So you get to see this picture and this location on the map. It brings it to life more. It helps you feel like you could be there, right? Now, if she added a Google Street View video, we could actually be walking down that street at as well, and we could be reading the story or listening to the story while we walk that same exact street. I think that's a fascinating way to engage with another part of the world. But I want people to think about the way we need to transform language education. And I mentioned this earlier when I talked about those layouts of the classroom, right? And I think it's the layout of the classroom is representative of the way that we think about learning. And so traditionally, we are classroom-centered. We are teacher-centered. And time, place, and pace of learning is constant. There's a standard curriculum with limited differentiation. Things don't change. Everything is about testing and standards. If we look to the student-centered model, the student is the center of attention. The student can learn anytime, anywhere. The student can have personalized learning. The teacher's role changes depending on what's happening that day. So I think this is a great way to think about this. So I want to talk about design and the importance of design and the way we design things for instruction, because it relates to the way we design anything. I'm not going to talk about the picture on the one side of the screen, but I think you can tell it's a bad design. But if you look at the one with the bicycles, it's also a really bad design. And I have a son who follows rules. He follows every rule. And I'm afraid that he might ride his bicycle right into that pole because that's what it's telling you to do. And that is really bad design. But this is my favorite example of design and the importance of design and why we need to carefully think about how we design instructional experiences. This is the first QWERTY keyboard. You see the QWERTY on the keyboard there? This keyboard was created in 1868 as part of a competition. There were numerous different keyboards competing in the United States at the time, and this keyboard won the competition. And part of the competition was that the keys inside of the typewriter didn't get jammed up. They didn't get stuck and break the typewriter. So the purpose of this keyboard was to slow your typing down so that the machine could keep up with you. We have computers now with this same keyboard. We have no mechanical device that is going to break, but we're still using this keyboard. And that is because it was designed and it was used enough to the point where we have not replaced it with anything. Although we're beginning to see examples. In some software platforms, you will see a keyboard that goes A, B, C, D, E, F, G. That's becoming much more common in a lot of virtual keyboard spaces. And it makes a lot of sense. After all, this was designed to slow us down. And there are 7 principles that we should think about when we consider design. These are the principles of universal design. The use should be equitable. It should be flexible. It should be simple and intuitive. It should be obvious what you do. The information should be perceptible. So if you make a mistake, you know what the mistake is. And you know how to correct your mistake. There should be a little tolerance for error. So if you make a slight mistake, you don't fail an exam, for example. Or some sort of activity. There should be low physical effort so it's easy for everyone. And the size and space should be appropriate for use. So that's basics of instructional design. So I'm really excited about this area, artificial intelligence and automation. This includes things like natural language processing, automated linguistic analysis, translation tools, automated speech functions, automated writing evaluation, bots, including robots and cobots, and automated translation. We have apps like Parla, which are using artificial intelligence and make it possible for learners to spend extensive amounts of time texting with the AI so that they are engaged in practicing writing while they're getting feedback from the AI. It's a great way for learners to get more practice And there are a number of different kinds of activities they can do. But what I like about this kind of thing the most is that you can create these kind of chatbots yourself. That teachers can create these kind of apps, and then you can customize it with the vocabulary that you want. You can customize it for the content that you're focusing on. You can customize it in any way that is most appropriate for you, and you can help the students get the kind of feedback that you want them to get in that automated experience. Of course, we have tools like Google Translate, right? And so this is a great way to be able to get students engaged in an activity and maybe help them with those difficult moments where they don't know a particular word or phrase. I don't think they should be relying completely on a translation tool, but I think if they're in the midst of a really interesting interaction and they're communicating with others, instead of stopping and opening a dictionary and looking at that, just this fluid, quick activity lets them stay engaged in whatever they're doing. But of course, Google Translate is not just an app that translates for you. It is a community of learners that are interested in language. And so these are people who you might want to interact with about learning English. You might want your students to interact with. And they are also working with a lot of artificial intelligence that is promoting education in general. Most of the artificial intelligence work that is happening in education today is happening at Google. This is an automatic linguistic analysis tool that was created initially for doing research. It was created to do second language acquisition research. So that's research about language. And this uses conventional measures that are used by linguists in doing research. These measures happen to indicate how good you are with vocabulary and how good you are with grammar. So you have the lexical complexity analyzer, that is your vocabulary and how sophisticated it is, and you have the syntactical complexity analyzer, your grammar. This same tool, I saw a presentation of this a number of years ago, and I said, you know, you could use this for teaching English. And the presenter who created this was surprised by that idea, but then he has since written a number of papers about doing it and using it for exactly that purpose. So the easiest way, you can download it. It is an application, but it's also just a website. So you can plug in some text. I plug this text in, and then you choose the measures that you want to use. And so learners could be doing this with their written text or the written transcription of their spoken text. And you get to see how complicated or complex your language is. So this is lexical density, lexical sophistication measure 1, lexical sophistication measure 2, etc. I only put in this one text, but if I put in a second text, maybe a revision, a second draft of a paper, it would be in red. If I put in a third one, it would be in green. And so it will compare my papers so I can see if I am getting better at these things or if I'm getting worse as I hopefully am making progress. So this is one of many tools that allow learners to get a scientific visualization of their language progress instead of relying on feedback from their instructor, which is not always the most convincing. I'm going to talk about some automated speech functions. We have automated speech recognition systems. We have Google Speech API. We have digital assistants such as the Amazon Echo, Google Home, Cortana, and Siri. So you probably are familiar with these. If you did not know, you can search Google with your voice by clicking on the microphone, and you can also go in then and use it for transcription. I have written entire book chapters by using Google for transcription. You can use any of these, and they allow you to interact with the content of the internet with your voice. So this is the Google Web Speech API demonstration that allows you to do transcription until your hard drive runs out of space. That's what I use to write book chapters, I said. This is a picture I showed earlier when I was in the classroom with children. and that is a Google Home device. So in the classroom, if the students need to know a fact, if they need to search the internet and find some information, they don't have to stop what they're doing and type on a computer. They can just ask the device and the device will know the answers. Maybe the teacher doesn't know a particular fact, and that's okay. Teachers do not have to know everything. Teachers who pretend that they know everything, I think, have caused problems in education. This device can help the process of learning be smoother. And just like I showed you with the chatting app, we can create applications to use with these devices. So I actually teach a course where my students create applications to use with the Amazon Echo, the Alexa, and they are able to make games, they're able to make trivia games, they're able to make all kinds of things where they interact with the facts that are available through these devices and the interactivity that is available through these devices. You're probably all familiar with some basic forms of automated writing evaluation, such as spell checkers, including Google Docs, Microsoft Word, and some other products like Criterion, MyAccess, WriteLab, Grammarly. These all give you some sort of automated writing evaluation. In fact, if you are to take a TOEFL test or an IELTS test or something like that, your writing is being evaluated automatically by one of these kinds of devices. There are a number of others. I'm only including them in here for your reference if you want to look back and try some of them out. I don't want to talk about all of them. But this is Grammarly, for example. It not only corrects something that you've written, but it gives you suggestions. It teaches you about how you might have phrased something differently and why, and what the meaning of that is. And it can help to make you a better writer. I know people who are professional writers who say that they have benefited from Grammarly and have it on all the time when they're writing. Similarly, there's the Moodle Essay Autograde tool that is created for the learning management system Moodle. And this is Gordon Bateson. He teaches in Japan. And he created this tool, which allows teachers to create their own writing lessons that have certain criteria. So the students have to write a certain number of words. They have to use specific vocabulary. They have to use specific kinds of sentence structures. They have to use certain phrases. All of these things are possible for you to create as the teacher, and then the software will do an automated analysis based on what you as the teacher think is important. I think putting the decision making in the hands of teachers is really, really important. So these are just a few screens that show you examples of how this one works. And again, some of this is for your reference, so you can look at it if you have the time and you're interested in this more. There are other assessment tools like this. Duolingo is now becoming quite popular. We are accepting it at our university. Most universities in the US seem to be accepting it now, during the pandemic at least, as an alternative to the TOEFL or the IELTS. And it is about a fifth of the price of the TOEFL, and it also only takes 30 minutes as opposed to an hour and a half or 2 hours of a test. And it is using automated language analysis. And again, it's there for your reference. You can watch that video if you'd like. But assessment is such a big deal. I want to talk about some alternatives to assessment and the way that assessment drives instruction, and instruction relates to assessment as well. So project-based learning is a great alternative. I'm a big fan of that. Just-in-time teaching, flipped learning, ongoing assessment, and e-portfolios. In project-based learning, we have authentic projects, authentic tasks. So projects tend to go on for a while. They're extensive. People use authentic language, authentic assessment. It's iterative, so it goes through many cycles. It's reflection-based, and you don't need to stop for assessment. You keep engaging in learning, and through the learning process, you are assessed. I think that's much better than stopping instruction in order to do assessment. The flipped classroom is a model that has been popular for a while, and I think when we had to move to virtual teaching, it became even more popular. So students will get something like a lecture, a video, and some sort of exposure to whatever the content is at home, outside of class. And then during class, they engage with each other and kind of in some of the ways that I was showing you earlier in those different classroom layouts. And then afterwards, they check their understanding when they're at home on their own, and they review. And then this is iterative also. So it's a very popular model, like I said. And it makes the most of the time that people have in class with others because they're engaging with others. They're not just listening to the lecture, which can be pre-recorded, much like we're pre-recording this lecture right now. We have things like e-portfolios, including KidBlog, Google Sites, Padlet, Evernote, 3Ring. These allow generally children, these are assessment forms for children, that allow them to collect the work that they've done for evaluation purposes. So you get to see a representation of the child's ability as you go through each of these examples. And as I mentioned at the beginning, this is really kind of the last big topic, the Internet of Things. So this links various devices, really almost anything, including digital assistants, projectors and screens, cameras and lecture capture systems, learning management systems, RFID chips and wearable devices, sensors, and it's soon expected to be the Internet of everything. So if you think about like the way electricity works today, the way that devices in your home and your office and in towns everywhere around the globe are connected with electricity, this is the way people are anticipating devices to be connected to the internet in the future. And I can tell you, I have seen some really interesting examples of this in Vancouver, Canada, a couple of years ago. It's been a while now. I was giving a talk, and I had a plastic water bottle that someone had given me, and when I was done with it, I went to these smart trash and recycling cans, and I threw it in the trash can, and I heard the trash can say to me, "No, you should recycle that." And I thought, that's amazing. And this was at a university. It was an experiment. There was a chip inside of that plastic water bottle that was actually sensing where that bottle was going and trying to correct my behavior. I thought that was pretty interesting. This picture provides you with some examples of the Internet of Things. And you'll see there are a number of things that we've talked about here. We have augmented and virtual reality. You see we have digital attendance, so that students have something on them that is taking attendance when they walk in the school, so we don't have to call their names. That's a wearable device. It could be for athletic monitoring of their physical abilities as well as attendance tracking. So many different sensors around the school to monitor what's happening, and all of these things can contribute to a better understanding of what the learners are doing and what they're capable of doing. And again, this is an alternative to stopping the engagement and doing this artificial testing kind of thing. In the Internet of Things enabled teaching environment, the teacher is at the center of all the decision making. All of this stuff that happens while the teacher is making decisions about when to implement different things, when the data is meaningful, and when to utilize it, and when to make changes to the activities that are happening based on the data that they're observing from the learners. And then with that, they can individualize learning, and it makes learning much more powerful. You can deliver the content adaptively, so maybe you have a classroom with 30 students, and maybe maybe there are 10 different ways that they're traveling through that content. Maybe there are 30 different ways they're traveling through that content. It can be paced differently for each student. You can assess them more effectively and less painfully. You can use these assessments to customize future learning, and you can create learner models that can be used to design future learning. And this is kind of what it looks like in visualized. There's a different pathway, but everybody makes it through to the other side, and everyone is successful, but they have different ways to get there. And teachers are crucial for success. Teachers are, as I've said a few times here, the teachers are the primary filter between technology and the learners. They need to be involved in decisions about assessment and about instruction. And they need to be provided with technological and pedagogical support and training. And I think teachers need to be able to design experiences that integrate the richness of this data in ways that students find to be relevant. They need to be able to experience learning within these contexts themselves in order to develop an empathy for the experience of their students. And most of all, they need to be prepared to understand, evaluate, and integrate future iterations of technology that will emerge throughout their careers. That's something I wrote a couple of years ago, and I would like to thank you. This is a book that you might be interested in that elaborates on a number of these ideas. It has stories written by authors from around the world that are English teachers and English teacher trainers, and I have some additional resources as well. The first resource is a gaming blog that is written by my friend Jeff Kuhn, and it is talking about all the different ways that gaming can be used for language education. He has a lot of really interesting ideas. And the second one is a blog that I wrote for a few years that covers a variety of topics about educational technology. They're very accessible, simple articles that can help you think about how you might use technology in different ways. The articles themselves are a little more academic, but they are also very practical, and they have many different suggestions that are very relevant to the kinds of things that I'm talking about in this talk. But with more elaboration, of course, because they're about 20 pages each, so they have many more examples and a lot more detail. And if you're really interested in exploring more about this, that would be a really good place to go. There are also some really good communities. The TESOL Call IS, that's again computer assisted language learning, and the IS stands for interest section, is a great resource. Every year they have the Electronic Village Online, which is a completely free online conference that goes on for a few weeks prior to the TESOL conference. So I would highly recommend that. There's also Calico, which is the Computer Assisted Language Instruction Consortium. It's a mouthful, it's a lot to say. This is a group of language professionals from around the world who do research and practice language teaching together. I have been involved with both of these organizations for many years. I was the president of both of them, actually the chair of the Call IS and the president of Calico. There is also ACTFL, which is a TESOL partner. Calico is a TESOL partner as well, and it's the American Council for the Teaching of Foreign Languages. And this is their position statement on technology. There's a link to that here. So it's just interesting to see the context of how important that is for all foreign languages being taught in the United States. I actually wrote this statement as part of a group that I was working with at Georgia State University a few years ago. And then there's the Learning Together site, which might be the most useful of all of these here. It is a very, very active group that meets completely online and has virtual conferences Even during normal times, they're always having virtual conferences and documenting all of that and sharing all of their experience together. And so there's always something to learn by visiting that site. So I suggest you take a look at these. I'm going to make this PowerPoint available so you'll have live links to all of these links, and hopefully we'll get to meet soon and talk about a lot of these different ideas. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy this presentation. 谢谢。